So what we read about last time was this ideal culture that Aurobindo depicts as being the culture of the land where Savitri was born. Very highly developed culture, as perhaps some of these old Vedic cultures were. So, line 92 says, these things she took in as her nature's food. This she is Savitri. These things she took in as her nature's food. But these alone could fill not her wide self. A human seeking, limited by its gains, to her there seemed the great and early steps, hazardous, of a young discovering spirit, which saw not yet by its own native light. It tapped the universe with testing knocks, or stretched to find truth, mind's divining rod. But there was a growing out to numberless sides, but not the widest seeing of the soul, not yet the vast, direct, immediate touch, nor yet the art and wisdom of the gods. A boundless knowledge, greater than man's thought, a happiness too high for heart and sense, locked in the world and yearning for release, she felt in her, waiting as yet for form. It asked for objects around which to grow, and natures strong to bear without recoil the splendor of her native royalty, her greatness and her sweetness and her bliss, her might to possess and her vast power to love. Earth made a stepping stone to conquer heaven. The soul saw beyond heaven's limiting boundaries, met a great light from the unknowable, and dreamed of a transcendent action's sphere. Aware of the universal self in all, she turned to living hearts and human forms, her soul's reflections, complements, counterparts, the close outlying portions of her being, divided from her by walls of body and mind, yet to her spirit bound by ties divine. Overcoming invisible hedge and masked defense, and the loneliness that separates soul from soul, she wished to make all one immense embrace, that she might house in it all living things, raised into a splendid point of seeing light, out of divisions dense, inconscient cleft, and make them one with God and world and her. Only a few responded to her call. Still fewer felt the screened divinity and strove to mate its Godhead with their own, approaching with some kinship to her heights. Uplifted towards luminous secrecies, or conscious of some splendor hidden above, they leaped to find her in a moment's flash, glimpsing a light in a celestial vast, but could not keep the vision and the power, and fell back to life's dull, ordinary tone.
The things we should do in as a nature predators born to feed not a bird self. A human city limited by its range. To her they seemed the great and early steps. Hazardous of a then discovering spirit, which is not fed by its own native light. Let's pause there. So all these things, these philosophies and these arts and poetry and all these characteristics of that high culture, she took all these things in as food for her nature, her outer being. But they were not enough to fill the whole of her being. These alone could fill not her wide self. She saw them, she perceived all these wonderful things as a human seeking that is limited by its gains. So this is what happens now with our human mind. We search, we extend the boundaries of our ignorance, and then we think we have achieved something. And we stop, we don't go further. So it's like that. But she sees all these things as the great and early steps, like the steps of a child. These are hazardous steps. So that means that they are not certain and sure. There's some doubt, some risk in them, but they are adventurous steps. The adventurous steps of a young, discovering spirit, the spirit of humanity at that time, which does not yet see things by its own native light. It's trying to find things out, but it doesn't see clearly from its own center of knowledge. So this it in the next sentence, would you like to read, sir? Yes? This it is that has a young discovering spirit. Yes? Yes.
Detect the universe with distant rocks, or stretch to find with minds dividing world. Now there was a growing out to numberless sides, but not divides seen of the soul, not yet the vast direct immediate touch, nor yet the art and wisdom of the gods.
So this is a beautiful image, no, of this young discovering spirit tapping the universe
knocking it, trying to find out what is there with testing knocks. And it wants to find out the truth, but what instrument is it going to use to find the truth? He says it uses mind like a divining rod. A divining rod is what a water diviner uses. There are people who can discover water below the earth without drilling for it. They have some kind of a feeling that water is there. No? They have that feeling in their body, but to help them, they use a stick that's divided. And they walk along with that stick, and when they come to a place where there's water below, the stick starts to move. They can't control it. It's very interesting. We had a gentleman here in Auroville who was divining not for water, but for power lines running through different places in Auroville. And he came here to Savitri Bhavan, and he was very, very thrilled with what he found. He said there were gold lines and silver lines and all different kinds of lines running through here in 2 directions. He made a kind of map of that. So he did it something like that. He had a kind of rod, and he walked along with it, and then it started to vibrate. And like that he could follow these lines of power that are in the earth below this place. So that's the divining rod. A divining rod that gives you some kind of information that's not accessible to your reason. This word divining, in this sense, it's connected with the French word deviner, which means to guess. But it's not exactly guessing. It's some kind of secret sense of the mind which gives some knowledge, and you can't say exactly how you know it. No? That knowledge comes. So there they are. They're trying to find the truth, but they have no other instrument than this mind. It's trying to find out, and perhaps here and there it gets the sense of something. So in that young discovering spirit and its efforts, there's a growing out to numberless sides, all different, reaching out to all different fields of knowledge, but not the widest seeing of the soul. When the soul is fully aware, it sees things in a much wider and more complete way. And there's not yet this vast, direct, immediate touch, the touch of knowledge on knowledge, where knowledge by identity, the direct touch, which is not accessible to our minds, only to our souls. So they've created all these wonderful kinds of philosophies, teachings, art, but it's not yet the art and wisdom of the gods. So Savitri, with her high memories, she is missing something. Even in this wonderful culture of the society that she's born into, she sees that it's inadequate, it's not complete. She's looking for something else.
Shraddhavan, I have one question. When she said he tapped the universe with testing knocks, he tapped the body, universe?
No, it's this young discovering spirit. So this spirit, with its attempts at discovery, it's making little experiments here and there at what it can know. But that's the image, you know. You're in a room and you're tapping at the walls to see, is there maybe a hidden cupboard here, or an opening or a window or something like that. So they're exploring the whole universe, trying to see, is there something here, an entrance, a way that I can pass through. Renana, would you read?
A boundless knowledge without then man's thought, a happiness too high for heart and sense, looked in the world and yearning for very lights
Release.
she felt in her, awaiting as yet for form, its asked for object, round with to grow, from nature's
Strong.
to bear without recoil, the splendor of the her nature worthy, her greatness and her sweetness and her bliss, her might
To possess.
and her vast power to love.
Let's pause there. So she feels within her this boundless knowledge that's greater than man's thought, and a happiness that is too high for human hearts and senses. She feels that knowledge and that possibility of happiness locked into the world, into matter, into the forms of the world, and she feels it there, yearning for release. That knowledge and that happiness wants to come out and be expressed. She feels it in herself and she feels it in the world. That knowledge and that happiness is waiting for forms that haven't manifested yet, that haven't evolved yet. But it's longing for objects, forms and things around which it can grow. And it's asking for, it's needing natures, human natures, beings who are strong enough to bear without recoil the splendor of her native royalty. It's not only that she's a princess, she's royal in another sense. She's come from the higher worlds and she's brought royal powers with her. And that's part of her nature. And she wants to find other human beings who are strong enough to meet that royalty in her without feeling that it's too much, without feeling that it's too strong for them. So there's something in her that's asking for these objects and for natures that are strong enough to bear without recoiling the splendor of her native royalty, her greatness and her sweetness and her bliss, her might to possess, that capacity that she has to get hold of you and take you and hold you, and she has this vast power to love. She wants to find objects and people to gather around her who will be able to respond to everything that she's bringing. Ganga Lakshmi, would you read on?
Earth made the stepping stone to conquer heaven. The soul saw beyond heaven's limiting boundaries, made a great light from the unknowable, a dream of the transient actions sphere.
So for her, earth is a stepping stone. A stepping stone is when you have to cross a river and there's not a bridge or a path across. You step from one stone to another. No? So it's she feels that earth is meant to be a stepping stone to conquer heaven, the higher worlds. And even her soul sees beyond those boundaries of heaven, because even those higher worlds are limited. No? The soul saw beyond heaven's limiting boundaries and met a great light from the unknowable, from the transcendent, and dreamed of a transcendent actions sphere. That's what she feels is her sphere of action. Would you like to read? Would you like to read?
Aware of the universal self in all, she turned to living hearts and human forms. Her soul's reflections, complements, counterparts, the close outlying portions of her being, divided from her by walls of body and mind, yet to her spirit bound by ties divine.
Yes. So she is aware of the one universal self in all the forms of the world. And she turns to the human beings, the living hearts and human forms who are around her. And she experiences them as reflections of her soul, as complements. Complements are things that make you more complete. So they're somehow different or separated, but they make you more complete. And counterparts. You have a particular role to play, somebody else has a role which is a complementary role. That person is a partner to you. She's looking for all those, she sees in the souls around her, her own reflections of her own soul, complements of her soul, counterparts. They are part of her own being, close parts of her own being, but they are outlying. Auroville has some outlying lands, and it seems we don't value them enough. We're always thinking, oh, we don't need those lands, we could sell them away and get more land in the city. The lands that are outside the borders, but sometimes those outlying lands are the most important ones. No? So she sees these other beings as parts of herself, but lying at a distance. They are divided from her by these walls of body and mind. They're in different bodies, they have different mental personalities and formations, but by in their spirit, in her spirit, they are bound to her, tied to her, connected to her by divine ties. She feels those connections. Kayananda?
Overcoming invisible hedge and masked defense, and the loneliness that separates soul from souls, she wished to make all one immense embrace, that she might house in it all living things, raised into a splendid point of seeing light, out of division's dense, inconscient web, and make them one with God and world and her.
So this is what she wished to do. She wished to overcome these hedges, these boundaries and barriers, even though they're invisible barriers, no? And these masked, veiled defenses that people put up around themselves. She wants to overcome those things, and she wants to overcome the loneliness. All these individual souls in all these bodies without communication. She wants to overcome that loneliness that separates soul from soul. She has this immense power to love. She wants to make everything all one immense embrace, that she could include in that immense embrace all living things, not only human beings, but plants and animals, everything that's living. And she wants to raise them all up into a new consciousness, a splendid point of seeing light. She wants to lift them up out of this cleft. A cleft is a narrow crack, like a canyon in the earth. They are there in this division, everybody separated. It's this dense inconscient that separates all the souls from each other. So she wants to embrace them all in her love and lift them all up so that they are one. Make them feel one with God and the world and herself. To be able to make all the living forms conscious of the oneness. Mahalingam.
Only if you responded to her call, still fewer felt the supreme Trinity and strove to make its Godhead with their own, approaching with some kinship to her eyes.
Yes. So there are all those people around her, but only a few of them respond to that love, that call that she sends out. And out of those few, still fewer felt that divinity that's within her, that screened, hidden divinity. Those few who felt it strove to make a connection, to mate its Godhead, her Godhead, with their own souls. Just a few people responded to her like that. They could approach with some kinship to her heights, some relationship. Your kin, it's your family, the people who are. So some people felt that spiritual connection with her. Just a few. Do you like to read, sir?
Uplifted towards luminous secrecies, are conscious of some splendor hidden above. They leap to find her in a moment's flash, glimpsing a light in a celestial vast, but could not keep the vision and the power, and fell back to life's dull ordinary tone.
Yes. So those few, they did feel lifted up towards these secret places full of light, no? Or they were conscious of some wonderful splendor, glory hidden above. So they make an effort to rise to her heights. They leaped to find her in a moment's flash, just for a moment. If you leap, you can only stay up for a moment, no? They glimpse a light in that celestial, that heavenly vastness. But they couldn't keep it. They couldn't keep that vision and the power. And they fell back again. They made the leap, they rose, they could glimpse something, but they fell back to just that ordinariness of life, life's dull, ordinary tone. When Mother uses this word ordinary in some of the recordings, you hear dull, ordinary tone. Real disgust in her voice. Joel.
A mind-daring, heavenly experiment, growing towards some largeness they felt near, testing the unknowns found with eager touch. They still were prisoned by their human brain. They could not keep up with her tireless step, too small and eager for a large-faced will, too narrow to look with the unborn infinite's gaze. Their nature, weary, grew of things too great.
So they had this mind that was daring the experiment, this heavenly experiment, to come close to her, and they were growing towards some largeness that they felt near to them in her, and they are testing where is the boundary of the unknown. They're trying to touch that, but they are still imprisoned by their human grain. Our grain, it's the way that we grow. Things that seem natural to us. That's the way, for example, that the wood grows. When we cut the wood, we can see the way that it has grown. And when the carpenter is using wood, it's easier for him to cut with the grain. And he tries to show the grain the beauty of the way that the wood has grown. It's much more difficult for him to cut against the grain. And so we have this expression when we have to do something that we really don't feel that we want to do, that it somehow violates something inside us, we say, oh, it goes against the grain, the way that we have grown.
The essential nature.
Something like that, yes. In our nature parts, no? So they are imprisoned by that way that their humanity has grown, no? So they couldn't keep up with her tireless step. She doesn't get tired. They are too small and too eager for her large-paced will. If we want to do great things, we have to be patient and calm and be prepared to take time. So she has that will which takes large steps, but we are too small and eager. We want quick results. If we don't get the results that we want quickly, we get tired, we give up. And they are, in their human grain, they're too narrow to look with that gaze of the unborn infinite. She has that gaze naturally. She's brought it with her when she came into the world. But those others, their natures grew weary. It's too much effort. It's all too high and great. They can't keep up with it because of the grain of their natures, of our natures. Would you read?
So even the close partners of her thoughts, who could have walked the nearest to her aid, worshipped the power and light they felt in her, but could not match the measure of her soul.
Yes. So there were some who were close partners, friends, close companions. Even those close companions of her thoughts who could have walked nearest to her ray. She's like a ray of light, no? They worship the power and the light they felt in her, but they're not able to match the measure of her soul. She's too great, too powerful. They can worship her, they can't match the measure of her soul. Do you like to read? You at the back, yeah?
A friend and kept too great holy to know, she walked in their friend towards a greater light, their leader and queen over their hearts and souls, one close to their bosoms, yet divine and soft.
That's how they saw her, no? They saw her as a friend, and yet there's something about her which is too great for them to know, to understand, grasp wholly. But for them, there she's their leader. She walks in their front, she's their leader. She's leading them towards a greater light. She's their leader, the queen. She rules over their hearts and souls. They love her, and yet at the same time they find her divine, far away, distant. They can't grasp her entirely. Gomsun?
Admiring and amazed, they saw her stride, attempting with a godlike Russian leap, heights for their human statures too remote, all with a slow, great, many-sided toil. Pushing towards aims they hardly could conceive.
You want to go to the end of the sentence?
Yet forced to be the
Satellites.
satellites of a sun, they moved onward to forego her light. Desiring they clutched at her with outstretched hands, or followed stumbling in the paths she made.
Yes. So these are the ones who are closest to her. They admire, they're amazed, they see her make these immense strides, and they try to keep up with her. No? But she is attempting, she's making steps with her stride, a godlike rush and leap with a tremendous power, heights that are too remote for their human stature. Or they see that she's pushing with a slow, great, many-sided toil. Her effort is moving something here and something there and something here, bringing everything together, pushing towards aims they can hardly even conceive, they can't imagine what it is that she's trying to realize. And yet they can't help it. They're forced to be satellites of her sun, just as the planets are satellites of the sun. No? They have no choice about it either. There's that power of attraction that keeps them moving around the sun. No? They moved, they can't forego, they can't do without, they can't live without her light. So they're stretching out their hands, trying to grasp something of her, or they're just following, trying to follow in the paths that she made. She goes in front, she's the leader. They try to follow her, but they're always tripping and falling and unable to keep up with her. These are the ones who are closest to her. Yes, Martin.
For longing with their self of life and flesh, they clung to her heart's nourishment and support. The rest they could not see in visible light. Vaguely they bore her inner mightiness.
So there are some who don't feel the divinity. They are attracted to her with the vital being, the self of life and flesh, the physical being. So they feel that they need her strength and her light. They cling to her. They want to make a nest there. Yeah. They cling, they hold tight to her to nourish and support their hearts. That's all that they can see. They can only see the visible light. They don't see all the rest that she had to offer them. Vaguely they bore her inner mightiness. So they just have a vague sense of that inner greatness, that inner power that is there. They feel the pressure of it sometimes, but they don't know really what it is. Francesca.
All bound by senses and longing heart, adoring with a turbid human love, they could not grasp the mighty spirit she was, or chained by closeness to be even as she.
So there were some people in the ashram who were like that. They loved the mother in a very passionate human way, and then they were jealous of anybody else who came close to her, and they were always complaining that, oh, you smile at so-and-so and you don't smile at me. So they couldn't grasp the mighty spirit she was. They couldn't, even though they might be physically near to them, they couldn't change to be like she was. Dhanalakshmi.
Some felt her with their souls and thrilled with her. Their greatness felt near, yet beyond mind's grasp. To see her was a summons to order. To be near her through a high communion suppose.
Yes. So some really felt her with their souls, and for them it was a thrill to be close to her. They felt her greatness, couldn't grasp it with their minds. So they loved to see her and simply adore her, worship her and adore her. And when they could be close to her, physically close to her, that brought the force of some kind of communion and connection.
So man worship a God too great to know, too high, too vast, to wear a limiting shape. They feel a presence and obey a might, adore a love whose rapture invades their breasts, to a divine
Ardor.
weakening the heart beats, low they follow,
Greatening.
heart and life.
Yes. So that feeling that those people had, he says it's like people who worship a God who's too great for them to know, and they can't give him a shape even. He's too high, too vast to wear a limiting shape. Instead, they feel a presence, and they obey a power, a might, and they worship a love, that the rapture of that love invades their breasts and wakes up their own heartbeats to some divine ardor, enthusiasm, and aspiration. Because of that God, they follow a law that makes their heart and life into something greater and nobler. You didn't read. Would you like to read? The lady? Yes? Would you like to read?
Opened to the breath is a new brighter air. Open to man is a freedom, a new world. This is high steps climbing to self and light. The divine paths, the soul's radiant sport. It saw, it felt, it nudity.
Yes, thank you. So, if people follow a God, worship a God like that, they feel that they are, their life breath, their life energy has opened up to a new diviner air, and that they've discovered a freer, happier world. A human being to whom this happens, he sees high steps, new possibilities, climbing to a greater fulfillment, to self and light. So Savitri's divine parts called to the allegiance of the soul. Allegiance, that's the feeling of loyalty that you feel to your leader. That you want to follow that person or that being. No? So those who saw her felt a kind of a soul attraction, a loyalty that this is the one that I must follow. No? So the soul feels and senses the deity, the divinity in her. I'll read the next sentence and then we'll stop. This is this man, no? Open to man is a freer, happier world. This is, he says at the top, so men worship a God too great to know. So there he's speaking in a general way, that the way that people responded to Savitri, it's the way that people have responded perhaps to Jesus or to Buddha or even to a God that they can't give any form like that, a divine presence that they sense. So when we have that experience, then we see these high steps climbing to self and light. So in a similar way, her divine part called the soul's allegiance. And those who respond to her, her will was puissant on their nature's acts. Her heart's inexhaustible sweetness lured their hearts. A being they loved, whose bounds exceeded theirs. Her measure they could not reach, but bore her touch, answering with the flowers' answer to the sun. They gave themselves to her and asked no more. So these were the true sadhaks who answered with the flower's response to the sun, just spontaneously. They loved her, followed her. Wonderful beings. So we can reread these lines again. These things she took in as her nature's food, but these alone could fill not her wide self. A human seeking, limited by its gains, To her they seemed the great and early steps, hazardous, of a young discovering spirit which saw not yet by its own native light. It tapped the universe with testing knocks, or stretched to find truth mind's divining rod. There was a growing out to numberless sides, but not the widest seeing of the soul, not yet the vast, direct, immediate touch, nor yet the art and wisdom of the gods. A boundless knowledge, greater than man's thought, a happiness too high for heart and sense, locked in the world and yearning for release, she felt in her. Waiting as yet for form, it asked for objects around which to grow, and natures strong to bear without recoil the splendor of her native royalty, her greatness and her sweetness and her bliss, her might to possess and her vast power to love. Earth made a stepping stone to conquer heaven. The soul saw beyond heaven's limiting boundaries, met a great light from the unknowable, and dreamed of a transcendent action sphere. Aware of the universal self in all, she turned to living hearts and human forms, her soul's reflections, complements, counterparts, the close outlying portions of her being, divided from her by walls of body and mind, yet to her spirit bound by ties divine. Overcoming invisible hedge and masked defense, and the loneliness that separates soul from soul, she wished to make all one immense embrace, that she might house in it all living things, raised into a splendid point of seeing light, out of division's dense, inconscient cleft, and make them one with God and world and her. Only a few responded to her call. Still fewer felt the screened divinity and strove to mate its Godhead with their own, approaching with some kinship to her heights. Uplifted towards luminous secrecies, or conscious of some splendor hidden above, they leaped to find her in a moment's flash, glimpsing a light in a celestial vast, but could not keep the vision and the power, and fell back to life's dull, ordinary tone. A mind daring heavenly experiment, growing towards some largeness they felt near, testing the unknown's bound with eager touch. They still were prisoned by their human grain. They could not keep up with her tireless step, too small and eager for her large-paced will, too narrow to look with the unborn infinite's gaze. Their nature weary grew of things too great. For even the close partners of her thoughts, who could have walked the nearest to her ray, worshipped the power and light they felt in her, but could not match the measure of her soul. A friend, and yet too great wholly to know, she walked in their front towards a greater light, their leader and queen over their hearts and souls, one close to their bosoms, yet divine and far. Admiring and amazed they saw her stride, attempting with a god-like rush and leap heights for their human stature too remote, or with a slow, great, many-sided toil, pushing towards aims they hardly could conceive. Yet, forced to be the satellites of her sun, they moved, unable to forego her light. Desiring, they clutched at her with outstretched hands, or followed stumbling in the paths she made. Or longing with their self of life and flesh, they clung to her for heart's nourishment and support. The rest they could not see in visible light. Vaguely they bore her inner mightiness. Or bound by the senses and the longing heart, adoring with a turbid human love, they could not grasp the mighty spirit she was, or change by closeness to be even as she. Some felt her with their souls, and thrilled with her, a greatness felt near, yet beyond mind's grasp. To see her was a summons to adore. To be near her drew a high communion's force. So men worship a God too great to know, too high, too vast to wear a limiting shape. They feel a presence and obey a might, adore a love whose rapture invades their breasts, to a divine ardor quickening the heart beats, a law they follow, greatening heart and life. Open to the breath is a new diviner air. Open to man is a freer, happier world. He sees high steps climbing to self and light. Her divine parts the soul's allegiance called. It saw, it felt, it knew the deity. Her will was puissant on their nature's acts. Her heart's inexhaustible sweetness lured their hearts. A being they loved whose bounds exceeded theirs. Her measure they could not reach, but bore her touch. Answering with the flowers' answer to the sun, they gave themselves to her and asked no more.